Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Renew Energy Partners Funding Solutions webinar. This is Mike Savage, Sales Manager here at Renew Energy Partners. I'm going to introduce in a second Charlie Lord, co-founder and principal here at Renew. But first, just wanted to let everybody know a little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can be sure to write them in the chat section. Otherwise, you will all be muted during the presentation. We will unmute during the Q&A section. So I'm going to pass it off here to Charlie Lord, co-founder and principal of Renew Energy Partners.
Thanks, Mike. And again, welcome everybody. This is Charlie Lord, and welcome to our webinar. If you have any questions or technical issues, just use the chat function and we are tracking that. It should be about 20 minutes worth of slides on Renew It Now, the new energy funding solutions for energy efficiency and on-site clean energy. And we'll leave a good 20 minutes for questions. We will be recording the session so you can share it with your colleagues. And again, thanks for joining us. We're thrilled to be able to share this model with you to address questions that you have and to either begin to or continue to work with you on energy efficiency projects. Renew Energy Partners launched about 4.5 years ago, and we launched to address the challenge in the energy efficiency and on-site clean energy markets in commercial, industrial, and institutional buildings that is created when over 70% of the commercial, industrial, and institutional buildings in this country are in fact sitting on energy savings that they're not harvesting. And the principal roadblocks that we saw to energy efficiency and on-site clean energy in the commercial, industrial, and institutional building sectors was that what we call capital and complexity. Building owners typically have competing demands for their capital budgets, and often in the commercial and industrial sectors, as well as the institutional sector, managing for energy efficiency is not what they do. So we focus on helping building owners in these sectors renew their buildings now and not later. There are obviously some critical benefits to renewing a building now, to launching energy efficiency and on-site clean energy projects now as opposed to later. One is, of course, immediately lowering energy bills, and the other is immediately lowering carbon emissions for those building sectors where sustainability is an issue. And the third, of course, is resilience. Working with Renew, and I'll describe our model in a moment, we help commercial, industrial, and institutional buildings reduce their energy costs and reduce their operating costs immediately. And we do it with no upfront capital required from the building owner. One of the things that we also emphasize in describing the energy efficiency, the energy services agreement model and the Renew model is that this is a good business decision for building owners in these sectors. To begin with, the wasted energy costs are in fact hidden in the budget, but they represent very real long-term lost cash flows to a building owner. And the second critical component that makes this a good business decision to renew it now and not later is that if a building owner waits and uses their own capital in a couple of years, the net present value of their cash flows from these energy savings projects is lower than if they do it now. So we emphasize the power of the Renew It Now solution. So Renew, as I mentioned, launched to break down the barriers to energy efficiency retrofits and combined heat and power projects in the commercial, industrial, and institutional sectors, which we saw as capital and complexity, as I mentioned. We provide third-party funding for projects that are otherwise delayed and deferred, and we work with design build contractors and leading technologies in the efficiency space to fund turnkey projects where the customer makes no upfront investment in the in the efficiency project sees an immediate reduction in their energy expense and an upgraded building. For those of you, and there are many who signed up for the webinar who are with design build firms, you know that you will scope a project and you will present that project to a customer, and often that customer will find that in fact they have other priorities for their capital budget. And principally they'll say, thank you, it looks like a good project, but it's not in this year's capital budget. With Renew, we help you get those projects funded now, which is a win for you, a win for the customer, and a win for the sector. So I'll talk about our energy services agreement in some detail. I'll give a couple of project examples. I'll run through the typical project profile. I'll outline the deal structure, our process, the customer support we provide, and a summary of the benefits, and then we'll open it up to questions. Some of you may well have worked with energy services agreement in the past. Often we get asked how they compare to a traditional performance contract in the ESCO context, and we can review that in the Q&A, and I'll touch on that briefly right now. But under the energy services agreement, we provide at Renew 100% of the funding for an energy efficiency retrofit. We own the project, and the customer does not need to access their capital budget, leaving their capital budget available for other projects. We work with our design build partners who design, procure, construct, and commission the retrofit. We provide long-term operations and maintenance support. We manage the project. We provide the long-term warranty as well. And we confirm the savings in a number at different stages for the customer to verify that, in fact, energy savings are the result of the project. The customer is paying for the energy savings by paying us essentially for energy savings units. This is structured as a service charge, and indeed our involvement in the project involves not just the installation of energy efficiency retrofit solutions, but long-term maintenance, long-term partnership, long-term services, and the like. And so because it's a service charge, the customer has the ability to treat it as an operating expense and to keep their energy service payments off the balance sheet. We also work in the combined heat and power context to install CHP systems, and we're working in that context with a straight power purchase agreement. One of the things that in which of course we own the combined heat and power system, and we're selling heat and power to the customer in a traditional PPA. One of the things that we think sets Renew apart is that we can do both efficiency and CHP in the same project, and so we can combine the two to do both CHP and efficiency, either side by side, ESAs or PPAs, or in some cases in the same agreement. And all of these projects are structured to give the customer positive cash flow on day one, so that they're seeing an immediate reduction in their operating expense. The energy services agreement is distinct from a traditional performance contract in a couple of ways. In many traditional performance contracting settings, the ESCO is lining up financing for the customer, and it does end up on their balance sheet, the customer's balance sheet. We also design the monitoring and verification program so that we are confirming the savings before we lock in the payments. But again, if you have questions on the distinction, we can cover that in the Q&A section. As I said, in many ways, the ESA is, in many ways, it's almost like a power purchase agreement for energy savings. I'd like to go over a couple of quick case studies here. This is a project that we're just closing now. It's a combined energy services agreement and power purchase agreement project. It's in the multifamily housing sector. We're doing an efficiency upgrade on the heating system, and we're also doing a CHP system as well. We've structured this as a 20-year PPA. The energy service payments run for 10 years of that. This is about a $10.5 million project, and you can see that the customer is paying, has PPA costs buying heat and power from us. They have energy savings payments for the first 10 years. That's the green stripe. The blue stripe is the blue block, if you will, is the remaining utility costs. And then their current utility costs are the blue line at the top. So you can see they have immediate savings that escalate over time to create significant savings. In this case, there's also obviously significant increased resilience from the ability to have on-site power in a city where there has been real resilience issues, and they've lived through some real challenges with long outages. So this is a project that will increase resilience, it will reduce their costs, and it will reduce their carbon footprint. This is a traditional energy services agreement case study. This is an industrial facility, a food processing facility with a multi-measure energy services agreement. We'll fund the retrofit. And one of the things that's important about the ESA is that so many of our design build partners are addressing the sort of the customer's expectations for return on investment and scoping projects just to the point where they think the customer will accept that ROI. With Renew, because we're looking for longer term and can fund longer term projects on energy services agreements that run 6 to 10 years, we can and do invite our design build partners to look for deeper retrofits with multiple measures. So we're looking for projects that may be well outside that traditional 2-year cutoff for ROI. So these can often be multi-measure retrofits. In this case, it's lighting, but it's also efficiency upgrades to their systems and the motors. It's about a $750,000 project, 8-year term. A customer sees about 10% of the savings in year 1 through 8, and then obviously all the savings after that. Typical project profile, just to reemphasize, we can do CHP and energy efficiency projects, and we're looking for projects that have multiple measures. So we're working with our design build partners to scope projects in a much different way with multiple energy savings components to them. We've traditionally worked in single owner portfolios, multifamily housing, hospitality, hospitals and healthcare, institutions such as schools and community centers, and industrial and warehouses. The energy service agreement projects are typically 6 to 10 years. The power purchase agreements with the right credit for CHP may go out 15 or even 20 with the right credit. We're doing projects from about $250,000 up to $10 or $12 million. We are sort of a rule of thumb of a good starting point for a project that we can make work is around 5-year payback, which is much different from the 2-year payback that many of our partners tell us their customers are looking for. The energy services agreement is a very flexible instrument. It allows a design build partner to phase in a project starting with one building and adding additional buildings to the ESA and simply restructuring the payments as we go, or even starting with a single measure and adding measures. That's a food processing facility I described as looking at a second phase that might involve additional components, and we can simply use the existing ESA to add scope to the project very quickly and very easily. And then of course we are measuring the impact of our projects. We measure our investors are impact investors, and so we have committed to illustrating the carbon emissions reduction and job creation impacts. I see we have a question about the escalation, the energy cost escalation that we use in the savings calculations. It's a great question. We've been using typically the number that some of the public agencies use in their financing tools. Connecticut Green Bank, New York Green Bank typically use 2 to 3% as an escalator for energy costs. That is the number that we use in our models. We've had typically very little pushback on that from clients because it's a number that has been used in by public agencies in this space. This is probably obvious, but it bears repeating here, given the fact that many of you are design build firms in this webinar. Essentially, the structure of the energy service agreement, this is true of a PPA as well, is that Renew will sign the ESA or PPA with the customer, and will sign the EPC contract and the long-term O&M contract with our partner. The partner's doing the design, build, procure, construct, and commission, and works with us on ongoing optimization. Many of our partners find that this model allows them to sign longer-term O&M agreements, which is a way to stay connected to their customers. And I should say, for those of you who are considering this model, our partners that bring us a project stay as the point of contact with that customer. It remains their customer both now and in the future. We are available as a resource for you with your customers, but we're partnered with you to increase the services and lengthen the term of your relationship with those customers that you introduce us to. We can drop into a project at any stage, but so we have projects where we are introduced to the customer directly through public presentations or otherwise, in which case we'll bring a contractor in to do the initial assessment, essentially the walkthrough. Or our partners will have done that walkthrough. They will have qualified that the customer is interested in an off-balance sheet solution or is likely struggling to fit this into their capital budget. And we will work with you to design the initial proposal, describes the energy services agreement, illustrates the forecasted savings, and the scope of the project that collectively we're proposing. At that point, if the customer is interested, they sign an MOU, which really just commits them to paying for the investment grade audit if they decide not to work with us, and if we deliver them a project that can deliver savings. So it's a light touch in terms of signing the customer up. It simply says if we at Renew and you as our partner invest in doing the deeper analysis on the building, the detailed audit, that the customer will in fact either move forward with us, in which case Renew pays for that design, or that they will pay for that if they go off to do it themselves. Obviously in phase two, our partners design the project. We work on the contracts, both with you and with the customer, get those signed. We fund the project. Our partners implement the project, and then in the ongoing, we provide funding for the ongoing O&M contract, as well as work with you to look for additional savings opportunities. Typically, we have an intake form. I won't dwell on this slide, but there's a fairly straightforward collection of data that we need to help put together our initial proposal, which comes in the form of as I mentioned, a proposal, indicative proposal to the customer that describes the energy service agreement and really in graphic terms illustrates the value to the customer. And basically, we need to understand a little bit about the customer, their current energy bill, energy costs, the potential costs of the project, any incentives that might be available, and then the ongoing costs, and principally the ongoing O&M. With that, we can usually run our energy services agreement analysis and present them with an indicative proposal. We always partner with our design build partners to put that together. I'm almost done, and we'll go to Q&A at that point. It's important to note that customers who are ready and willing to do a project right away, we always make clear that in fact they should do that, that their capital will cost less than ours. Now, we always point out to customers that the return on their investment is, as we put it, infinite. They're not putting any of their capital up, and they're seeing immediate savings. That nonetheless, it is true that if they invest their own capital today, they'll get more of the savings. But as I pointed out right at the beginning, if they wait a year or certainly two, their cash flows are higher doing it with us now. So this is a big piece of understanding our value, is that we are not taking a position in their building. We're not constraining their capital budget or their capacity to borrow on their building. And in addition, we're delivering significant added value and services. We fund the construction. We partner with you on O&M. We provide the long-term O&M. We help identify additional savings opportunities with you. It's off balance sheet to the owner. We're taking much more of the risk of the project performance, and you can get a project done now. So we like to think that this is a powerful, a different sales proposition than simply trying to sell people energy equipment. It's really energy efficiency as a service, and it comes with significant additional value. I guess to reiterate that, we do work with you as our design build partners to provide significant additional services that are very different from when an owner implements these projects themselves. And not the least of which is this ability to continue to look for additional savings. And the other one I would emphasize is that all of our projects, because we're measuring carbon impacts, and because we want to monitor and verify the projects, we implement smart buildings technology in every project that we do. So part of the capital cost traditionally is the ability to monitor and verify the savings, but also to have a smarter building. Again, I've covered much of this, but the customer is going to see an improved building and at a much lower risk with no upfront capital and the ability to do it now. Some of the questions that we get right away from building owners is, what happens if I want to sell the building? And in fact, the energy services agreement is assignable to a buyer. In addition, there's always a buyout option, in which case a building owner is buying out the energy services agreement. They see all of the savings, and when multiplied by the capitalization rate, that means they're instantly sitting on a more valuable building. Because this is a service agreement, we don't lock in the value at the end of the term. We absolutely forecast it in the proposal so the customer can see knows what to expect. Many of our projects do not have a fair market buyout at the end, but if there is some residual value, the customer can buy out the project or can extend the ESA for a couple more years at a much lower payment. So there's a lot of flexibility at the end of the term as well. I will stop there. Again, thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to unmute the whole group and open it up to questions at this point. This slide has our contact information, Mike Savage, our sales manager, and as well as me. We will be sending all of you who registered a recording of this, which you can then share with your colleagues. But certainly, if you have questions after this or want to follow up with us, you'll have this slide in the recorded version. I see a question about comparing our program to PACE, which I will answer now and then as I unmute you all. And it's a great question. Renew does provide a PACE solution for those projects where it makes sense. The principle, I may mute everybody again just because I'm getting some background noise. I'm going to mute everybody and then I will open it up again in a second when I finish answering this question. So we do offer a PACE solution. in those jurisdictions where it makes sense. As you know, I think all of you likely know that Property Assessed Clean Energy is a program whereby investments in energy efficiency, on-site clean energy, and renewables can be added. Payments for those investments can be added to the tax bill. The principal difference, well, the energy service agreement is, we found, an important alternative to PACE. There are a number of jurisdictions that don't have as effective a PACE program as the one in Connecticut, parts of New York and California. Massachusetts is launching a PACE program modeled on the Connecticut one, which should make it much more accessible, much easier for municipal jurisdictions to opt in. And in those states where there is an easy opt-in at the municipal level, we see a lot more PACE activity. We do not require lender consent in the same way that a PACE project does. We have because we're not in front of the mortgage and we subordinate the energy services agreement to the current mortgage instead of jumping ahead of it, we're much less threatening to the current mortgage holder. So to summarize, the principal difference between between an ESA and a PACE project is, number one, we're available in those jurisdictions where PACE hasn't been authorized by the city government. And two, even in jurisdictions where PACE is in place, there may be some projects where either the customer can't get lender consent, or there is no lender to get consent from. And this is another thing that we've seen in Connecticut, where if the mortgage has been sold into a secondary market, there's no way of getting the required lender consent. We know from conversations with people in Connecticut in that system that in the process of doing now about $120 million worth of PACE deals, they've had somewhere in the neighborhood of $80 million off-ramp from PACE for the reasons I just described. So essentially, we are an alternative to PACE in those situations where, for one reason or another, but principally because of lender consent, you can't use PACE. And then again, in those jurisdictions that don't have a PACE approval, we're also available. I have a second question here. What happens with a small project? What do we do about small? What do we offer in the way of small businesses? I guess it depends on what question. What constitutes small? As I mentioned, our minimum project size is typically $250,000 for the capital costs on the project. I should add, and this is a very good question, I should add that that's the total amount under an energy service of single energy service agreement. We have looked with partners at, for example, retail chains or restaurant chains. If we can get a master energy service agreement in place with an owner that might have 10 buildings, we can do a sort of a retrofit program across those 10 buildings that hits that minimum. That would work well. And in fact, we're rolling out a program in California with a technology partner that is going to be under a master energy services agreement, and the typical install will be more in the $50,000 to $60,000 range. So it's really that minimum 250 is about the customer relationship in total, not a per building number. All right, I'm going to unmute everybody to open it up for additional questions, and we'll see where we are. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Opening up now for questions if there are any, and if not, Great. Well, those were excellent questions. Thank you for using the chat function to, and again, I'll leave it for just one more second to see whether there are additional questions. If you do have follow-up questions, please feel free to be in touch with either Mike or me. We will, as I mentioned, be sharing the recording with you all to share with your colleagues. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and we will look forward to working with you. Thanks, everybody. Take care.